A prison sentence often feels like the ending of a story, but for the real people getting locked up, it's really the start of a harsh and frightening new phase of life.
R. Kelly is currently serving prison time for racketeering, bribery, sexual exploitation of a child, and sex trafficking. It has been a spectacular crash for the man who was once known as the king of R&B, with a discography that includes more 90s top 40 hits than any other male solo artist. Rumors of Kelly's sexually inappropriate behavior had swirled for years, even making headlines during the peak of his stardom. His questionable behavior first came to light in the mid-90s. His marriage to fellow R&B artist Aaliyah was dissolved when it was revealed that she was just 15 years old at the time of their wedding. In the early 2000s, Kelly was accused of sexual misconduct, including sex with an underage girl. In 2002, he faced 21 child pornography charges in Illinois. All charges were dropped, but as the years passed, rumors continued to plague the star's reputation. Finally, in 2018, the documentary R. Kelly, Sex, Girls, and Videotapes became the first of a series of damaging pieces of investigative journalism that lifted the lid on Kelly's abuse of young women and girls. The documentary's release eventually led to his arrest, trial, and a sentence of 30 years behind bars.
Never thought that I would be here to see him be held accountable.
And according to several reports, Kelly's time in prison has not been easy. Though he was only formally sentenced in 2022, Kelly has been in prison since he was first arrested after turning himself into police back in 2019. At the time, he was held at Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center. According to tabloid gossip website TMZ, the following year, Kelly was the victim of a brutal attack by a fellow inmate, gang member Jeremiah Farmer. Farmer allegedly entered the disgraced singer's cell and began punching him repeatedly as he slept. It is believed the attack occurred because Farmer had become frustrated by repeated prison lockdowns, which were implemented as a result of Kelly's protesters demonstrating outside the complex. Kelly suffered only minor injuries in the attack, but his lawyers later claimed that it had exerted a significant mental toll on the singer. In the weeks following, R. Kelly allegedly experienced paranoia and insomnia, living in constant fear that another attack may be around the corner. Reports suggest that R. Kelly's time in prison has coincided with the downturn in his physical health, too. He and his legal team claim that the treatment he has received behind bars has been inadequate and potentially life-threatening. In a voice recording published by Rap House TV, Kelly discussed a recent procedure he had undergone to remove blood clots from his leg. According to the singer, staff at Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center had performed the operation incorrectly. He said, "Somebody miscommunicated, or somebody took a guess at what's going on with my leg. I'm not supposed to die this way. You're not even supposed to take a chance on that." He later complained that staff failed to x-ray the affected area and said that the lack of diagnostics left him afraid for his life. Kelly's concerns have been echoed by his lawyer, Jennifer Bonjean, who told ABC7 Chicago that a lack of adequate medical care is a widespread issue in prisons.
Every prisoner deserves medical attention, medical care. The MCC is required to address these things in a competent fashion.
R. Kelly has continued to be embroiled in legal battles since he was handed his first lengthy prison sentence in 2022. Back then, the singer was held at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center, where his lawyers claimed he was unlawfully kept on suicide watch. In court documents filed by Kelly's legal team, his lawyers argued that he was being kept on suicide watch as a form of punishment, and that he displayed no evidence of being at risk of dying by suicide. Kelly went on to sue the prison in question. Kelly's legal team have also filed multiple appeals against his sentences, which now includes a separate 20-year sentence in Chicago, alongside the 30-year sentence handed down to him in New York. In April 2024, his appeal against the latter was rejected by the Chicago Appeals Court. Kelly currently remains behind bars, having been transferred to a prison in Butner, North Carolina.
On November 19, 2015, former Subway spokesperson Jared Fogle issued a tearful apology. He said, "I so regret that I let so many of you down." Fogle was about to be sentenced in federal court on charges of keeping and distributing child sex abuse materials, as well as engaging in sex with underage girls. Fogle's fall from grace had been sudden. He'd made millions of dollars as the sandwich chain's pitchman after losing hundreds of pounds on a diet that included Subway sandwiches. He was often seen smiling while holding up a pair of the size 60 pants he used to wear. The court sentenced Fogle to 15 years and 8 months in prison for his crimes. He was also made to pay $100,000 to each of his 14 victims.
Everyone recognizes he's wealthy, but today he's less wealthy, and for the benefit of those victims.
Fogle appealed the sentence on the grounds that Judge Pratt was unduly influenced by Fogle's ties to Russell Taylor, who headed up Fogle's anti-obesity foundation and with whom Fogle had shared child sex abuse materials. A federal appeals court was unswayed by Fogle's argument and found Pratt's sentencing was substantially reasonable given the disturbing facts of the case. He later attempted to levy a so-called sovereign citizen defense against the court and even tried to sue the federal government in 2018, claiming he was the victim of a conspiracy. Following his sentencing, the Federal Bureau of Prisons sent Jared Fogle to the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City. The prison is the first stop in an inmate's journey in the prison system. This would have been a new experience for Fogle since he'd been on house arrest before his sentencing. A month after Fogle arrived at the prison, the BOP, following the court's wishes, transferred him to the low-security FCI Englewood in Colorado. The 320-acre facility, built in 1938, houses nearly 800 inmates. The men must wear khaki prison-issued clothing and are subject to a minimum of 2 roll calls a day. They typically work a job in the prison from morning until afternoon and receive recreational time afterwards. Because he's a sex offender, Fogle is also required to participate in counseling. Soon after arriving there, however, Fogle learned that life in prison can be perilous. On January 29, 2016, a fellow inmate attacked Fogle while they were in the prison's recreation area. Steve Nigg said he beat Fogle because the other sex offenders revered him. In a letter obtained by TMZ, Nigg wrote, "Jared is their hero. You would not believe how arrogant Jared was. He hired bodyguards, and the other child molesters looked at him as if he was a god." Fogle was left with a bloody and swollen face after Nigg's attack. The prison put Nigg into solitary confinement, extended his sentence, and transferred him to another prison. Nigg didn't believe sex offenders should be allowed to serve their time in a minimum security prison. His nephew, Jimmy Nigg, told AZ Central, what he wanted to do was send a message, and he did. If he wanted to kill Jared Fogle, he would have been able to, and he didn't. No one stopped him from assaulting Jared. He sent the message, and he walked away. In a leaked letter from November 2021, Jared Fogle told an unnamed correspondent that he was the most healthy and in shape he had ever been in prison, weighing in at 180 pounds. He claimed to run 4 to 5 miles a day and apparently stays away from junk food. He wrote, "I snack on granola bars and protein bars. I feel really good physically and mentally." Fogle said that working out is one of the things he can control in a prison system that tends to take it away. In the letter, he discussed other ways in which he passed the time, including watching NFL games on TV and reading both the New York Times and historical novels. He said, "I still love to laugh and smile." Fogle also admitted that he had royally screwed up and that he was selfish and entitled, and claimed that he often thinks about all the people he has let down. Fogle's earliest release date is March 24, 2029. He wrote, "All I can do is learn from my stupid mistakes to be a better man when I get released in a few years." Stephen DeBroda, the former assistant U.S. attorney who prosecuted Fogle, told the Washington Post that Fogle ended up in prison not because of a mistake, but due to a long-standing and persistent pattern of criminal behavior.
Danny Masterson was once best known for his role as the wisecracking Stephen Hyde on That 70s Show. In 2023, however, he was convicted for forcibly raping 2 women at his home 2 decades earlier. Since entering the California prison system in December 2023, Masterson has served time in 3 prisons, including the maximum security facility where cult leader Charles Manson once lived. Masterson's current home is a minimum and medium security prison where he has access to rehabilitative and academic programs. In the meantime, he's appealing his sentence after the judge in the case denied him bail. He's also fighting a civil suit related to his conviction. Police arrested Masterson in 2020 on allegations he had drugged and raped 3 women between 2001 and 2003. However, his first trial ended in a deadlocked jury and a mistrial. In a second trial held in 2023, a jury of 7 women and 5 men convicted him on charges related to 2 of the 3 women he had allegedly attacked.
They were able to see through the evidence and come to the right decision and finding this defendant, Mr. Masterson, accountable.
Judge Charlene Olmedo, who oversaw both trials, sentenced Masterson to serve 30 years to life for his crimes. Masterson and his victims were members of Scientology, and prosecutors in the case said that the church had shielded Masterson and prevented the women from coming forward for years. This may have been due in part to Scientology's conflicting message to its members about reporting crimes. The organization has denied these claims. Masterson has been shuttled around the California prison system during his first few months of incarceration. His first stint was in North Kern State Prison after he started his sentence on December 27, 2023. He was only there for about a month before being transferred to Corcoran State Prison. Corcoran is the maximum security prison that housed Charles Manson until his death in November 2017. Masterson's time in Corcoran was short-lived, however. After about 3 weeks, prison officials moved him to the California Men's Colony. An unnamed law enforcement source told Deadline that this had been for his own well-being. It's not hard to imagine that Masterson was unaccustomed to prison culture. One former convict told the Los Angeles Times, "In prison, if someone walks up close to you, that means they're trying to harm you." This, of course, is a far cry from a fan wanting a selfie or an autograph. It's also not a stretch to imagine that due to his fame, Masterson might have been an easy target for other inmates. We certainly know that Corcoran isn't a pleasant place. It tends to be violent, cells are cramped, conditions are often unsanitary, and the prison's rehabilitation programs are limited at best. The prison is also replete with security measures such as razor wires, security cameras, and electrified fences. According to TMZ, Masterson would have had to undergo the same intake as every other prisoner in the California penitentiary system. This process takes up to 90 days. During that time, inmates are prohibited from family visits and access to personal property. They can take advantage of recreation in the yard, but have limited access to whatever entertainment is available. With all the moving around Masterson did in his first 90 days, it's hard to know exactly what he was or wasn't allowed to do in that time. Notably, though, it wasn't until mid-March that his estranged wife, Bijou Phillips, went to visit him with their 10-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, Masterson will likely be meeting with his lawyers as his appeal moves forward. He'll also be talking with other attorneys on his civil harassment case filed by women from the criminal trial and their families. That case, in which the Church of Scientology is a co-defendant, is scheduled to go to trial in September 2025. While all of this unfolds, Masterson is being held in the West Wing of the men's colony, where medium and minimum security inmates live in a dormitory setting per the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Inmates housed there can get involved with various so-called self-improvement programs, from anger management and family relationships to cognitive behavioral therapy. It doesn't seem to be anywhere near as tough as Corcoran, of course, but whether Masterson actually stays in this prison remains to be seen.
On July 17, 2015, Dylann Roof was attending a Bible study group at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Approximately 1 hour into the meeting, Roof stood up, pulled out a gun, and opened fire on the other members of the group, who were all black. As reported by ABC News, 9 people were killed in the attack, and several others were injured. Roof ran from the scene immediately after the shooting. However, he was caught and taken into custody during a traffic stop the following day. Roof wrote a manifesto which was published on his personal website, explaining why he targeted the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. In the manifesto, he said he had no choice, as there were no active white supremacist groups in the region, and he felt it was his responsibility to act on their behalf. There were signs of Roof's growing racism, but Roof's friend Joey Meek told CNN, "Dylann wasn't a serious person. No one took him serious. But if someone had taken him serious, this all would have been avoided."
He was just saying he wanted segregation. He wanted a race war.
Roof was ultimately convicted of 33 federal hate crimes. In a separate trial, he was convicted of all 9 murders, 3 attempted murders, and a weapons charge. In the federal trial, Roof was sentenced to death. In the state trial, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dylann Roof is currently on death row at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. According to multiple reports, Roof claims being repeatedly targeted and harassed by guards and his fellow inmates. In August 2016, Roof was taking a shower when he was reportedly attacked by a fellow inmate who was supposed to have been locked in his cell. As reported by the Post and Courier, Dwayne Stafford punched Roof in his face and in his back before deputies arrived to escort Stafford back to his cell. Prison administrators eventually acknowledged Stafford's cell was open for almost 11 hours. However, the guards insisted that they made sure it was locked prior to the incident. Records indicated the electronic panel was in working condition and registered that the door was unlocked. Inspectors also verified the door was not compromised in any way. Per the Post and Courier, Roof said guards also planted a weapon in his cell, for which he received a 6-month punishment. In addition to being placed in isolation, Roof lost his phone and television privileges and was prohibited from using the prison's law library. In response to the incident and the subsequent restrictions, Roof went on a hunger strike. However, according to NBC News, the protest ended a day later after corrections officers forcibly tried to take his blood and insert an IV into his arm, causing him to briefly pass out.
Throughout his incarceration, Dylann Roof has kept journals and sent letters to family and friends. According to reports, his writings emphasize his lack of remorse and reiterate his conviction that the murders were justified in his mind. In one particularly chilling journal entry, Roof said he had no sympathy for any of his victims. He did express sympathy for himself, though, saying he was essentially forced to commit murder and is now suffering the consequences of that decision. Videos of Roof's visits with his parents only further underline his lack of empathy for others, with reports suggesting that the inmate openly laughed at his parents' obvious distress and threatened his father. Roof is also reportedly in regular contact with a number of so-called serial killer fanatics with whom he shares his white supremacist views. As reported by the Associated Press, Roof's attorneys filed an appeal in August 2021, but 3 judges with the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond unanimously rejected the appeal, which was filed on the grounds that Roof was incompetent to stand trial. The judges wrote, "No cold record or careful parsing of statutes and precedents can capture the full horror of what Roof did. His crimes qualify him for the harshest penalty that a just society can impose."
Colorado man Chris Watts murdered his pregnant wife Shanann and their 2 young daughters, Bella and Celeste, on August 13, 2018. After burying his wife in a shallow grave, he put the bodies of his children inside an oil tanker on a job site where he was employed. At first, he denied any involvement in his young family's disappearance. However, Watts confessed to the murders after being confronted with mounting evidence against him, including footage from a neighbor's security camera that appeared to show him moving the bodies. He pled guilty to all 3 murders and a plea agreement that would allow him to avoid the death sentence. Watts was given 5 life terms without the possibility of parole. Soon after Watts' guilty plea was accepted by the court, he was sent to spend the remainder of his days in a maximum security prison in Colorado. But his stay at this particular institution was short-lived. On December 3, 2018, Watts was transferred to the Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. According to Colorado Department of Corrections spokesperson Mark Fairbairn, he has been moved out of Colorado for security concerns due to him being a high-profile offender. There hasn't been a lot of detail regarding how Watts is being held. Watts probably isn't allowed to mix with the general population. Since he's a high-profile inmate who murdered his children, his safety would be severely compromised around other inmates. Former federal inmate Larry Levine told A&E, "Colorado is a big state, but Watts' crime touched the community on a lot of levels. People who commit crimes against children are the most hated people on the inside. Everybody knows who he is. He was probably getting death threats."
It's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
As a result, Watts is most likely being held in solitary confinement. In fact, a source inside the prison reportedly confirmed to People magazine that Watts is being held in protective custody. This would mean that Watts is in a solitary cell for 23 hours of the day, with no interaction with other inmates and very limited interaction with correctional staff. The source went on to say that Watts is probably the most hated person inside the prison walls, and that he's even despised by the corrections officers. The anonymous source told People, "No one wants anything to do with him. He's on the lowest social tier of the entire prison. He's in protective custody because if he's around other inmates, he'd be in real danger. He's an outcast even among criminals." Being held for the remainder of his life in a small cell doesn't allow for many recreational options, so finding ways to make the time go by is pretty limited. People's source stated that Watts spends most of his time reading and writing to pen pals. Watts' cell is apparently sparsely decorated, with only a few photos of family members tacked to the walls. Watts also has a Bible in his cell, as he has apparently become a born-again evangelical Christian since his incarceration. Watts used to enjoy spending Christmas with his family, but the New York Post reports that he has grown to despise the holiday season. Not one to willingly discuss his life before his imprisonment, Watts is perhaps reminded of the life he once had every time the holiday season rolls around. The anonymous source told People he doesn't like talking about his life before prison, but he has said that he used to be a huge fan of Christmas, decorating the house, spending time with family, and he knows 100% that it'll never happen again and that it's his own fault. He's in hell of his own making.
Jodi Arias was convicted for the first-degree murder of Travis Alexander in May 2013. Arias was eventually moved to Perryville Prison in Goodyear, Arizona, to serve out her life sentence without the possibility of parole. According to Parade, the facility isn't even an hour away from her victim's hometown of Mesa. But before the move to her long-term confinement, Arias was transferred a few times. She spent time in the Arizona State Prison Complex, the Estrella Jail, and the Maricopa County Jail. according to the Cinemaholic. It was at the Estrella location that she met her cellmates, Tracy Brown and Donovan Baring. She became friends with the two women until they both realized that it was a mistake to form a close relationship with the convicted killer. It might not be surprising to hear that the first 2 years were some of the worst of Jodi Arias' long sentence. The convicted felon was held in maximum custody at Perryville Prison. ABC 15 described the difficult conditions of her new life. Not only was the cell 12 feet by 7 feet, but she was forced to remain there for 23 hours of the day.
Jodi Arias' life will now fit in a 7 by 12-foot box. Look at how big that really is, or should I say small.
Arias was allowed visitors for 2 hours per week, but the interactions were separated by thick glass. Although she remained at Perryville, Arias was eventually put into the less restrictive custody. According to her inmate file obtained by 12 News, she could have cellmates again, as well as interact with the other prisoners in a group. In the following years, the convict enjoyed increased freedom and kept busy working at the Lumley Library of her unit. Arias began the part-time gig as a library aide in 2018. Before then, she had the unpleasant task of scrubbing toilets, according to prison records obtained by Radar Online. The new library job came with a pay cut of 10 cents, but she had only been making 50 cents an hour. In 2016, Phoenix rapper Kareem "Lefty" Williams produced a video about Jodi Arias. The two managed to get in touch via a phone call in 2016, which was posted on Radar Online. In the conversation, the felon provides a brief view of her life on the inside and admits that her situation isn't always bad, especially when it comes to the food. She usually gets a heads up when her favorite meals are available, and there's a new menu posted every week. Arias made the options from Monday through Friday sound rather bleak, saying, "On the weekends they give us a hot dinner. On the weekdays, it's like sandwiches. Nothing is very good." Even TV host Nancy Grace visited Estrella jail to investigate the food served to Arias in prison.
We package our own peanut butter. We buy it in 5-gallon white buckets, and we have a machine that'll measure it so they get the right amount.
But the cooked meals served at the end of the week seemed like a real treat. She described some of the offerings, saying,
"We had chicken fajitas here tonight.
Oh, wow.
They were so good. Big old pile of caramelized onions and some bell peppers."
She later described her breakfast with hash browns, bell peppers, onions, and cheese, along with buttered pancakes, syrup, cereal, fruit, and a sausage patty. Just like with the dinners, Arias said the morning meals are always better on the weekends. While Jodi Arias may be physically prohibited from leaving the penitentiary, her exposure to the outside world isn't as limited. In her recorded phone call with the rapper Kareem "Lefty" Williams in 2016, the convict revealed she can listen to FM radio stations, plus watch a list of TV channels. The latter include Univision, ABC, CBS, PBS, Fox, BET, CNN, TNT, USA, Lifetime, and A&E. On top of the regular TV channels, Arias mentions that she can also view some digital media, but her overall access to the internet has restrictions. In her recent comments on her website, Arias talks about having her own tablet that has a news app. Being locked up isn't as much of an isolating experience for Jodi Arias as it would seem. Her links to the outside world went beyond the consistent visitors, TV shows, and radio stations. In his conversation with Arias, Kareem "Lefty" Williams mentioned that he has taken a lot of strong criticism and straight-up hateful comments over his video featuring the prisoner.
"You just came here to rap about Jodi Arias, right?"
That's my homie. Well,
her response was telling about how she viewed her own situation regarding the public. Arias replied, "Oh yeah, haters are gonna hate." Williams responded by saying that both of them might be two of the most hated people alive. Arias responded by describing how her situation was the polar opposite. She said, "It's all good. If this is what it is like to be hated, then keep hating. I've had so much love coming in my direction, I can't even respond to it now." During the many years that Jodi Arias has spent inside a prison cell, her friends help her connect to the outside world. In 2013, Donovan Baring handled numerous posts on all of Arias' social media accounts. During their interactions, Arias gave specific directions on exactly what to say and who to communicate with. When asked by ABC News about why Baring sacrificed so much of her time assisting Arias, she explained that she had a difficult time finding Arias guilty of her crimes. Baring said, "Never ever have I seen her raise her voice, seen her yell, seen her do anything. So when I'm sitting there in court, it blows me away because I'm sitting there knowing the person that I know, seeing her and talking to her and seeing how much compassion she has.
I wish I could just say, wait a minute, that's not true.
And what would you say?
I say that's not Jodi.
But according to Inside Edition's Jodi Arias, Cellmate Secrets, Bering's opinion of Arias soured, having witnessed her manipulative behavior. Arias managed to find someone else to take Bering's place. In 2018, prison officials were aware of her strong social media presence, as reported by 12 News. Jodi Arias has used the internet and her network of friends outside of prison to sell her artwork on one of her personal websites, Art by Jodi Arias. Arias explains on her website why she began making art, saying, "The act of creating art has been with me since I was old enough to hold a crayon and has remained a part of my life in varying degrees, from mere dabbling to blissful obsession." But she also admitted that her reasoning had to do with struggling while incarcerated. She added, "I often felt hungry in jail, and my family could do little to financially support me, an adult who should have been feeding herself. Paintings and drawings are not the only types of art that Arias has been paid for while behind bars." In an interview with Inside Edition, Arias's former cellmate Tracy Brown gave details on how she worked as a tattoo artist for fellow inmates. Brown has several tattoos that Arias had done for her. It took years before Donovan Bering and Tracy Brown realized Jodi Arias' true nature. The two ultimately ended their friendship with her and recently revealed what their former cellmate was like on the inside. When talking with Inside Edition, Brown explained how Arias would manipulate prison guards, fellow inmates, or even people outside of prison when possible. She said, "She will use you to get what she wants, and when she's done with you, she will throw you away." According to Inside Edition, Bering agreed, saying she felt fooled into defending Arias for so long. She said,
"She got away with things that other inmates didn't get away with. She was a very attractive young girl who liked to flirt, and the male guards just ate it up."
Aside from Bering's dedicated social media management, Arias also benefited greatly from what she was able to obtain from the prison guards, including the means to perform her internet side hustle. Brown explained that there were a couple officers that she would flirt with.
And they would find the tattoo equipment, things you can get in trouble for, leave it alone.
High temperatures due to regional climate or unexpected heat waves can be extremely dangerous for prison inmates. In Arizona, where Jodi Arias is serving her jail sentence, the heat can reach over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the Daily Beast, those heat conditions can sometimes lead to hospitalizations or even death. But Arias has often been provided with resources to mitigate the danger and provide comfort that many other incarcerated individuals do not have access to. A post on Arias' website revealed that prison guards were supplying ice in a styrofoam cooler for her to use with her fan, according to Radar Online. But according to her website, in 2021, someone announced that they would attempt to break Arias out of confinement, so she was moved to another cell with the luxury of air conditioning. Over the years, Arias has had access to other perks too. It's been reported that she possesses a respectable collection of magazines and has been allowed to have some fashion options, such as a set of brand new tennis shoes. As described by the New York Times, there are plenty of incarcerated individuals who have had a far worse experience than Jodi Arias. But her life on the inside hasn't been pleasant, with probably the worst aspect being the numerous threats that have been made against her. In 2015, Arias was sent a letter that was confiscated before it reached her, which warned that there was a plot to hire an inmate to harm her, according to 12 News. The following year, Arias claimed another inmate was heard yelling at her, saying, "I'm going to expletive kill you, expletive the same way you killed redacted name." In 2021, another event occurred which was more bizarre than life-threatening. A man whom Arias had never met before claimed that he was going to rescue her from prison. He was caught in the process, as explained on JodiAriasIsInnocent.com. For her safety, Arias was moved to a more secure location and was forced to pause her daily activities. In 2012, while Jodi Arias was preparing to go to trial for the brutal murder of Travis Alexander, a wealthy art collector named Ben Ernst became interested in Arias. Ernst was dating another woman at the time, but began communicating with Arias. A friend of Ernst told In Touch, they quickly became buddies and eventually were talking on the phone about 3 times a week. Even though Arias had been convicted, the couple still became serious enough that she began making wedding plans and even spoke about having a child with Ernst. Her imprisonment was a major obstacle, so she wrote a letter to her friend and mitigation specialist, Maria de la Rosa that said, "Ben can't come visit, so here's what he needs to do. If we marry, then he can petition a court to grant us visitation." The marriage never happened, but it didn't stop her boyfriend from visiting her in the following years. In 2019, Radar Online revealed that Ernst still went to see Arias several times a month. Although conjugal visits are prohibited in the Arizona prison system, their visits were several hours long. After Jodi Arias' sentencing, her visitor privileges were extremely limited. Her visits were no contact with a glass wall in between, and she was only allowed to have 2 hours a week with her guests, according to ABC 15. Her list of approved visitors was limited to 20, and each one had to pay a fee and pass a background check in order to see her. In her 2016 phone call with Kareem "Lefty" Williams, Arias spoke about how she would soon have contact visits. Since then, she's had guests often, and most of them aren't a surprise. According to Radar Online, visitors include her mother Sandra and her brother Joseph and sister Angela, plus the frequent visits of boyfriend Ben Ernst. In 2020, reports of misconduct and sexual harassment from prosecutor Juan Martinez led first to his firing and then disbarment in July, according to the Associated Press. Martinez was the attorney in Jodi Arias' trial, so her legal team quickly seized the opportunity and appealed the court's decision. Martinez had revealed the identity of a juror in the case to a blogger he was sleeping with, and Arias' lawyers argued that the judge didn't do enough to control the media coverage. Her lawyer stated that both incidents deprived her of the right to a fair trial. While the Arizona Court of Appeals was critical of Martinez's behavior, and he was eventually disbarred, the ruling made it clear that it had nothing to do with the outcome of Arias' case. The statement read, "We conclude that Arias was convicted based upon the overwhelming evidence of her guilt, not as a result of prosecutorial misconduct. We strongly disapprove of his actions. We are compelled to follow the well-established principle that we do not reverse convictions merely to punish a prosecutor's misdeeds." The failure of the appeal, and with no chance for parole, means that Arias will continue living in similar conditions as she does now for the entirety of her life sentence.